Crowhill here. Today we review an IPA and discuss cheap stuff from China. Hey, good evening, Pigweed.
And good evening, Crowhill. How about some beer and conversation?
Oh, that sounds like a great idea. So, what are we drinking?
This is a local-ish IPA.
Okay, fantastic. Sounds good.
All right, what's on your mind?
Well, I was looking at my purchases recently, and I realized I've saved a bunch of money.
Good.
Because I bought...
Yeah. Who doesn't like to do that?
Who doesn't like to do that? Yeah, so I bought this USB charger from China, and it was pretty cheap. Unfortunately, it caught fire.
Yeah.
But I had a cheap fire extinguisher from China.
Oh,
So I put out the fire with the fire extinguisher, but it turned out that sprayed a bunch of nasty chemicals all over my house.
Carcinogenic, I imagine.
Yeah, right. So I got some cleaning products from China.
Yeah.
And that spread some other nasty chemicals that actually gave me a rash and breathing problems.
Yeah.
Right.
Asthmatic
So I
responses.
bought some herbal supplements that were laced with heavy metals and some ointments and stuff that gave me a rash.
Oh, well.
It was all worth $50 though.
Well, you did save money on that USB.
I did save money.
Didn't you?
I did save
sounds
money.
like you need a beer.
I think that's probably true. I do need a beer.
Fair Winds Brewing Company.
Yeah.
This is their Howling Gale IPA. It's a Virginia beer,
Right.
and Virginia's got a lot of coastline.
Sure.
It's got a lot of rivers too.
Yeah,
So I imagine that this brewery is on the coast, or I don't know, James River or something.
Yeah, well, yeah, you might think that, except this is actually from Lorton, where the prison is.
yeah. Well, see what prison labor.
See what the prisoners did with this beer here. What do
why
you got?
not? I mean, making license plates,
Yeah,
brewing
sure.
beer.
Why not?
do
Why don't we have prisoners brewing beer? I mean, that would be a reasonable thing for having them do. What are you thinking?
Well, so I did not check the brew date or bottle canning date. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty old, if I'm reading the numbers right. It looks like it's September of last year. It looks like it's
Yeah, September 10th of 2024.
It looks like it's 8 or 9 months old,
Yeah.
which is old for an IPA.
Well, it's old for if you want the aromatics, if you want the
If it's a hop forward beer,
Yeah.
you don't want your hops to fade.
Yeah.
And,
I'm still getting a lot of hops.
I am too.
I'm not getting tons of the bright aromatic stuff that you would expect from a relatively fresh beer, but I am getting a little bit of dank flavor and a lot of strong hop bitterness.
Yeah, I would say it is old. It's just not undrinkably old.
No, it's not. No, it's not bad. That's just. I think that it's probably. I think if we had a fresh one, we'd probably get a lot more of that aromatic hop.
You
a
know,
lot more
that would be interesting. If we'll have to think about this. If one
How
day,
do we do that? How do we do that?
If you could find, on the shelf, you realize, wait a minute,
Here's
there's some
two
old
of them.
mixed in with some new, and then getting them both to find out.
Yeah,
if
we
you
gotta
can-
keep
you
our
can
eye
taste
open for that. That would be an
Or,
interesting.
or just age it yourself. Just get it. Next, get an IPA and then let it sit on the shelf for a
6
year
months.
and say, can you taste the difference?
Yeah,
'Cause
that would be fun.
be a good experience.
That would be fun. Yeah, and so maybe we could buy some Chinese IPAs.
Yes. All right. So first off, we all know we get way too much stuff from China. But where I would start is anything that goes in your mouth or your pet's mouth.
Yeah.
All right. A cheap plastic squirt gun, I'm okay with that. I do not think we need to be taking vitamins, dog food, pharmaceuticals.
Right. Yes, there definitely are distinctions to be made. So you're right that there are some things that, it's a squirt gun or whatever. That doesn't seem to make much difference.
Right.
But there are other things where there are actual health concerns. Like, for example, just recently I found out that some Chinese clothing has chemicals on the clothing that absorb into your skin that are not good for you.
Now, would it be things that are restricted in the United States?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
does it work
that's
like
the
that? Or if it's something is restricted, like we can't put this dye in our food.
Yeah.
Are we going to buy food with that dye in it from somewhere else, or are they
Apparently, we have a bunch of restrictions. We have labor laws, we have environmental laws, we
Yeah.
have all these things that restrict the way things are made. Chinese don't follow that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So if they're growing something or they're making something and it has bad industrial waste in it,
Right. And plus
they don't
just,
really care.
Just straight up fake knockoff
Right.
products. You
Yeah.
know, that's just
They're doing it cheap.
They stick a symbol
Mm-hmm.
that looks a lot like a Nike swoosh, just slightly different than
Right.
you.
Or they don't even care. And
Or
they
but-
just don't care about violating intellectual property rights.
No, I mean this is the so when we well, I'm not sure how to structure this discussion here. It's like so if we let's just back up to why is this going on?
Yeah.
Okay, did we decide at some point? Look, we are willing to trade American manufacturing jobs for inexpensive products, like we're dropping the cost of things for American consumers. And in the name of free trade, which is going to allow us to sell our stuff
Yeah.
more easily overseas, like, all right, we're just going to do like the R&D and the intellectual stuff and the science stuff, and we'll do all of that, and you guys will buy that. The cheap manufacturing junk, guess what? We're going to decimate the middle of the country,
Yeah.
get rid of manufacturing, and you guys can do that. I mean, did we consciously, economically make that trade-off?
Here's the way I would characterize it. And I don't know if this captures it all, but there's three components. One is we get to buy a bunch of cheap crap, okay?
Right.
Which in a way increases our living standards because
Yeah.
we don't have to pay so much to get
Exactly.
this squirt gun or whatever, The second thing is we said, well, we don't want to be the manufacturing economy anymore. We want to be the service economy. So
Yes.
let's let those poor people in China and every place else do the manufacturing stuff. We'll do the service, the intellectual stuff. We'll do the marketing. They'll do the production. That kind of thing. And then the third part of it was this idea that capitalism would transform the stupid communist Chinese into having more of a Western idea about. So I think the first one, the idea of buying goods cheaper, well, there's obviously benefit to that.
Yes.
As long as they're not, giving you bad rashes and whatnot,
Right.
So there's that. The idea that they would do manufacturing and we would do the intellectual stuff is just dumb because, the average IQ is 100, which means that half people are stupider than 100 IQ, which means that you need to have jobs for those people. And you can't just have everybody in America doing the things that require an IQ of 120.
And
You
isn't
just
it
can't
possible
do it.
that these decisions are made by people who don't live in
Right.
who live on the coasts?
Yeah.
And the flyover country where all this stuff is made
Yeah.
is not going to affect them if furniture and manufacturers and toaster manufacturers go
Right.
out of business, even though those manufacturers were the only thing holding that town together.
Yeah. And also, I want to clarify, by saying that, I'm not trying to say that people who work in manufacturing jobs are stupid, because obviously they're not. And people who work in marketing jobs aren't always smart. A lot of them are very stupid. But
Yeah.
but the idea that we would push all the manufacturing there and we would be doing this higher level kind of work is just societally doesn't make sense. You have to have people doing that kind of
so
work.
what was the thinking besides disdain for the manufacturing
Mm-hmm.
communities that the coastal elites,
Yeah, well, the idea
are
was that they
unaffected
could do
by.
it cheaper over there. And
but then we
here's-
just to get us more cheap goods.
yeah,
So let me use the toaster.
okay,
Okay. 1959, the amount of money that you're spending on a toaster
yeah.
is much greater than what we're spending now. Right?
Much
So
greater.
so let's just say
It also lasted longer, but still.
all right, well
yeah.
that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
So you start off with going it was right now, I don't know what's a cheap toaster? $19.99.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so a little bit more than minimum wage.
Yeah.
Where in 1950 maybe it was $10, which was 5 times the average wage.
Right.
It was better built, but also it was a greater household investment.
Mm-hmm.
Like an appliance costed a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so you had a couple of things going on. It was better made. It could be fixed.
Yeah.
And you had an industry. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where small appliance repair shops were everywhere. So you
I remember.
Would anybody take a 1999 toaster to a guy to have him replace the spring inside because
not.
the spring is broken?
Of course not. You just buy a cheap one off Amazon and it'd be delivered the next day because it would cost you $20.
Yeah, like he's not going to fix it for $2.
Yeah.
Right, because he's got his own wage, he's got a store to maintain.
Right.
So now, by the time he takes the thing apart, and it's possible that the thing is soldered together, and it doesn't just easily disassemble and give you access to that one spring that's broken.
Because it's not designed to be
Right.
repaired. It's
Yes.
designed to be a throwaway thing. So you've got this idea of getting cheaper stuff is a benefit. Absolutely. You know, if you have to spend half your income on food, and then, you know, we've come up with some economic deal where now you're only spending an eighth of your income on food, obviously that is a huge benefit. So getting cheap stuff from people who can make it cheaper does make sense.
But hasn't it also? No, you want to finish? You got your point to finish?
Well, I was just saying, yeah, it does that, but it also sends all those jobs over there.
And it inspires a culture of consumerism.
Yes.
Which we have then jiggered the economy around. Like we all need to be always buying stuff always, and I don't think that was going on just one generation ago.
Do you remember when there was after 9/11 and there was a decline in the economy, and basically everybody thought it was their patriotic duty to go out and buy a bunch of crap?
Well, the president told you it was.
Yeah, right. You need to go out and buy stuff because that's what's going to be better. So unfortunately, we have this economy that's driven by everybody buying more stuff now than they did
cheaper
a year
and
ago.
all the time. Now you think of let's just say, 100 years ago, maybe even less than that, a farmer, right? He's out there working in the field with his one pair of cowboy boots.
Yeah.
But those pair of cowboy boots might have been a week's pay.
Right. But they were well made.
And then when since there's nothing to do in the evening, you clean your boots,
Right.
you smoke a pipe, and after a while, you might take them to get resold
Right.
at the cobbler
Yeah.
guy, and you have also one pair of Sunday shoes.
Yeah.
And
now you've got 25 pairs of shoes.
You've got 25 pairs of shoes.
Yeah.
The house I grew up in, well, actually, the house I'm living is even older than the house I grew up in. It was in the early 60s. My parents each had a 3.5-foot closet,
Right.
which contained all the clothes they owned.
Yeah. So, in a way, is it?
I had to I had to bring somebody in to take half of my bedroom upstairs to turn it into a walk-in closet for Mrs. Pigweed to accommodate all the clothes and shoes.
But isn't obviously it's better to have, your Sunday go to church shoes, your casual kick around shoes, your running shoes, your flip flops, your hiking boots,
Yeah.
your ride the motorcycle boots,
Right.
right. I mean, so obviously it's an increase in your standard of living,
Right.
to have the ability to have all those kinds of things.
But a middle-class person didn't live like that.
Yeah.
We're not rich compared to them. I see pictures of my parents when I was a kid at a party.
Mm-hmm.
First off, they're all blue collar, and first off, they're all wearing ties.
Yeah.
Just at a
regular party.
At a regular
Right.
party.
Yeah.
And they're in an unfinished basement.
Right.
In somebody's house. Now
Which is normal.
They had
Was then.
You
Was
bought
then, yeah.
you bought a single family home.
Yeah.
with an unfinished basement.
And then you finished it yourself if you had.
And you finished it yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's what my
Yeah.
parents did.
That's what my parents. Yeah, I remember being, I don't know, I was 12 or 13, and my dad's got a big saw down there, and some, I had an uncle who was an electrician, and
Right.
you know what I mean. They came
Right.
over, and
Sure.
so is it a change in the cultural mindset, or that we just have to have so much stuff, or is it, and so the cheaper the better, or did making it the cheaper the better turned us into consumer whores?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. I think, there's a lot of components going on here. It's obviously in our interest to get products cheaper, but it's not necessarily in our interest to get crappy products cheaper.
All right, so think about this. With tariffs, let's just say the tariff says that that 1999 crappy toaster, I'm sticking with my toaster analogy here, is now $28.
Yeah.
And I was at Walmart. First off, the reason I'm in Walmart is because I'm cheap anyway. And I see that the 1991, and I see the $27 one. I don't even notice that the $27 one is made in America, and the first one is made in China. I'm
Yeah.
just buying the 19er. Now the tariffs have driven that Chinese toaster up to the price, past the price of the American toaster, right?
Yeah.
The trade-off here, that's inflation, right? I'm paying more money
Right.
for the product
Yes.
that's been driven up by the tariff.
Yes.
However, if we revitalize an American town that is held together by the toaster making company,
Yeah.
I'm simplifying all of this,
Right.
but you
Yeah,
get
yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
saying. Is it? Would you get away from free trade? I don't know enough about free trade and tariffs and whatever, but just follow the logic here.
Yeah.
With the patriotic sticker, we've decided that there's a particular sticker that's going to let you know when you go to Walmart.
Buy American.
You're like, buy America. You're like, so you don't have to look for the small type on the bottom that
Yeah.
says made in China. It's a flag and it makes you feel good, and it's look for the union label.
Yeah.
And you say, yeah, that is more expensive than I really want to pay for, but I'm going to do it anyway. Ultimately, economically and culturally,
Yeah.
do we benefit from driving that price up if it brings the
Well, I
toaster
think
back?
I think so. I intentionally try to buy things in my town when I can, because it's to my benefit. If people in my town are making more money, if people in my town,
You
if
don't
the
want to see some
store-
bare storefronts in
Right.
your downtown.
Exactly. So if in my town this store is doing well, that means I can hire more people, which means that people in my town have jobs and not right. So and there are communities that do the same sort of thing. Like, for example, I've been told that a lot of Chinese Americans, they don't go to the bank to borrow money, they go to their uncle to borrow money. Right. So that they're not giving the money to Bank of America, they're giving the money to the bank of Uncle Cho.
But Uncle Cho isn't just doing that out of the kindness of his heart, but the fact that he's going to charge interest, but the interest goes to Cho and not Bank of America.
And not as much interest. But yes. So there definitely is an approach to this question that says it's good to keep things local because you're keeping the money in your community, you're keeping, or in your country, or in your whatever. So I understand that perspective. I also understand the perspective of, well, look, if people in China can make the same thing way cheaper than we can, for whatever reason, then it makes sense to us to get it cheap. I get that side of it too. So
And I also get, like, what I'm saying. I am allowing the government to step in,
yeah,
and drive up the price of the foreign. And let's assume here that inferior product. But I'm also in favor of the consumer having the freedom to go, you know
Yes.
what? I'll make the decision.
I'll buy
if I
American,
if I want to buy a crappy toaster every 3 years, and because because it makes more sense to me than to buy one that's twice as long that will last 3 times as long. You know what I mean? I don't really want to spend $40 on a toaster, even though probably it's a good investment, but I'm on a budget here. You know what I
Right.
mean? You can't. Yeah, yes, you do get what you pay for,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that you can always, buy the expensive thing that's going to last longer.
Yeah.
But
So-
do you want the government to be the one that forces you to?
Well, so when we get governments that involved, it gets much more complicated because you have other kinds of things going on. Like with the Chinese government will subsidize products from China so that to undermine things, they'll do currency manipulation. They'll have different kind of industrial policies to.
And of course, the when our toaster manufacturer moves to China, they just steal the patent.
Yes.
So there's that.
Exactly. There's that issue. There's also environmental regulations. There's health regulations. There's worker regulations. So they use slave labor in China, where they don't follow the same health standards. They don't follow the same safety standards. And like if somebody in Nevada could do the same thing if they weren't operating under those kinds of, under the kinds of regulations that we have.
Right,
So,
but by doing what you're saying, you are driving prices up.
yes. So what we do in America is we impose all these regulations that make it harder to produce things in America. And then we buy stuff from people who aren't holding up those same standards. It's kind of like people talk about like oil production. Oil production in America is like the safest oil production anywhere. Any place else that they produce oil, they're doing it in a less environmentally safe way.
Yes,
So-
and it's a crappier level of crude, which requires
Often,
greater
right,
refinery. But go ahead.
So if you have something produced in America, it's being produced in an environmentally safe way, in a way that protects workers, and it's so all these protections are in place. So obviously the cost is going to go up. So the idea of then just turning around and saying, no, we're going to buy this cheap thing from somebody else doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, why are we doing both these things at the same time? We're saying,
Well, yeah, it's sort of what I was saying at the beginning. Have we made that choice?
Yeah.
That, yes, probably it's worse for the individuals in charge. It's certainly, who are working, but they're grateful to have the work at the cost of our own workers in order to get the inexpensive item here and lower the cost of goods.
Yeah, and it was all, well, one of the big drivers of this, as I mentioned before, is we thought that if the Chinese started making money and you started to have rich Chinese people and you had a market economy and they started seeing the benefits of capitalism, that would drive them away from communism. It didn't work.
No.
Whoever came up with that theory,
Right.
sorry, you were wrong. It hasn't happened.
But yeah, but that's specific to China because all of these goods
right.
could be made in
India or something.
Why?
Right.
But
Why
what-
don't we buy from India?
or why not? What is the labor cost so much lower than Mexico or the Dominican Republic or
Yeah,
why
right.
So
Why not our hemisphere?
that the
Yeah.
shipping that it's offset by the shipping costs.
Yeah.
Is
I
it
was-
really that much lower that you can't build in Honduras,
Right.
and save the shipping cost?
Right.
It
I
must be.
I was working with a publisher who had their books printed in China and then shipped over here
Right.
because it was so much cheaper that even sticking it on a ship and shipping it all the way across
Yeah.
the world was still cheaper than having it done around
Yeah,
here. That's
yeah.
kind of crazy.
That is kind of crazy. But it's also a motivated and educated workforce.
Yeah.
It's a good workforce.
Yeah.
I think more than, better than what you're going to get in northern Mexico.
Yeah. So I want to push the conversation in a slightly different direction and
Right.
talk about why are we propping up the communist Chinese?
Yeah.
Why are we doing these trade policies to make China rich, where what they're going to do with that money is build a bigger navy, have more influence around the world, be a bigger threat to us? Why are we doing this?
And control. What was the thing they talked about during COVID? The supply chain.
Exactly. So that's another part of it.
Right?
This is not-
They can just hold you on. They go, okay, well, we're in a war. We're actually not shooting bullets at you, but you're not getting any meds. What?
Right.
We're
That's
not
another
getting meds.
component of it is why have we allowed ourselves to become dependent on the Chinese for pharmaceuticals, for other crucial things, certain rare earths, other kinds of things that, like, who was minding the store? Who was thinking that, okay, it's smart for us to be dependent on China for all these things, that if we got in a conflict with China, they wouldn't give it to us
Right. So
anymore.
even if you're talking about simply free trade and cheap goods,
Yeah.
does it have to be China?
Yeah.
Like you said, I'm sure India's got to be dirt cheap.
Yeah.
And much more reasonable people.
Yes.
And educated and English speaking.
Yeah.
And why haven't we moved all of that manufacturing?
So we
India.
are basically undermining our own strategic interests by making China rich. Why are we trying to make China rich? So that they can build more boats, so that when we get in a conflict over Taiwan, which we're dependent on for computer chips,
Right.
so we're dependent on Taiwan, and we're enriching China so that they can build a big navy so that we won't be able to defend Taiwan. I mean, I don't know that we should defend Taiwan anyway, but it doesn't seem like anybody is paying attention to these things. Nobody's minding the store.
I give you that. So but still, like the freedom of the. So I'm on my. I'm about to buy my third hose nozzle.
Growing up, we had one hose nozzle,
Forever.
and it worked forever for
For-
my
for-
entire childhood.
I went out there to clean off my desk and my deck, and 25% of the water just came backwards into my chest out of the nozzle that I bought 2 years ago.
Because it's cheap plastic.
Now,
Right.
but did I buy the $7.99 nozzle instead of the $17.99 nozzle?
Right.
And is that just, hey, the consumer gets to make his own choices, and I made a bad choice, and now by the time I buy my third nozzle, I could have bought the one made in Milwaukee, and maybe that's just a lesson learned for me, and maybe I should have just spent the money to begin with, and we don't need to have trade policies that drive the nozzles all to $17.99.
Right.
Well, what do you say about that?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting question. If people want to buy cheap stuff, is the government supposed to stop them?
Yes, that's what
Okay.
I'm saying.
But okay.
But could we have the flag, the national flag emblem, the Made in America, where you're going to go? You know what? I'm going to be spending more money, but I'm supporting fellow Americans, and it's going to be a better product as long as it is a better product.
Yeah. Okay. But that kind of glosses over some other issues, which is, by buying that cheap thing, we're sending money to China, which is supporting our ideological and, unfortunately, possibly military adversary.
Yeah.
That we're strengthening them so that they can go around the world spreading their false ideology and having more influence in Africa and other kinds of places. So there could be a national interest in saying, no, I'm sorry, you can't buy that $7.99 nozzle from China because we don't want to be sending all that money to China. I'm kind of leaning in that direction. I'm thinking I don't want to buy anything from China anymore. Because, okay, it's cheaper, I'll do without. Or I'll.
But I think it needs to come with a little bit of a little bit of a bully pulpit rather than trade policy.
Yeah.
In that
Tell people
my
why.
flag sticker,
Yeah.
encouraging buy from, but then you're going to get the economic pushback from the thing. But who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there could be a national interest in not getting it, but that doesn't mean we couldn't buy from India, for example. They could probably do cheap
We're not
stuff
right.
in
It's
India
not a
too.
protectionist thing. It's like who are we beholden to here?
But also, why are we allowing Chinese workers? They hire 10-year-old girls to work in the fabric factory in China, but you can't hire 10-year-old girls in America. They can dump their sewage straight into the river in China. You can't do that in America. So why are we, if we're going to have these standards and believe that it's right to have these standards, why are we allowing people to ship in products who don't uphold
Right.
those
You
same
tell
standards?
American companies that in China you don't have to pay the same wage. I get it. You're going to pay the local rate.
Yeah.
But there are these other aspects that you're required, and then they'll go, if you're going to do all that, I might as well just build it.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't seem
Or
right
build it
to
at
me.
home, or
It doesn't seem
whatever.
right to me to impose a bunch of requirements on American companies and then not have those same requirements on all the stuff that we're importing. It seems to me that you say, okay, you can't import this crap into America unless you have uphold certain standards that we,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you saw my new hiking boots over there. Yeah. Save some money because it's built with Chinese prison labor.
Right, or the Uyghurs or something.
All right, let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. Yeah, I should probably pay more attention. But you know what? I'm cheap.
The
I
thing
mean,
that-
why would I go to Walmart if I wasn't cheap?
Right. But the thing that bugs me the most about all this is just the question, who was paying attention to this all this time?
Yeah.
Who allowed us to become dependent on China for pharmaceuticals? Who allows us to become dependent on them for all this other kind of stuff? It's just dumb. It's like nobody was paying attention. These are the experts that are...
All right. Well, pay attention. Buy American.
I think I'm going to not buy Chinese anymore.
Very good.
All right. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.